So,
Great.
okay, welcome to the October 2025 OFA Collective Farmer Circle entitled Dairy Herd Transition to Winter. And I'm Harriet Bihar, and I do farmer services with the Organic Farmers Association. And Nancy Chang is also here with OFA. So the agenda, what's going to happen today is I'll talk a little bit about what is OFA, and then just talk about getting prepared for winter, various ways that you can stockpile forage, possibly think about doing overwintering or in the areas where the cattle will be outside, doing windbreaks, helping you figure out what kind of forage you're going to have for winter. A lot of dairy farmers are doing 100% grass fed, but you don't have to. But it's really important to have enough forage for the winter, and then to also understand what nutrients are available in the various types of forages you have, so you have enough on hand, and then allocating the forage for most efficiency, so you're not wasting it and it's costing you extra money. And then we'll have a little discussion at the end. So first, who is the Organic Farmers Association? We are farmers. I'm a farmer. Most of the board directors are farmers. And we really focus on what organic farmers need, both education, advocating for policies that work well at the federal and state levels. We really are there for organic farmers. And there are other organic organizations that are there, but they are not solely focused on the farmer voice, and we are. We do quite a few different things. So we like to get together with farmers and talk to them about various issues and find out what's not working, what is working. And so we have these work groups. We've had quite a bit of success with the organic crop insurance work group and also the National Organic Standards Board work group, where we have made then, from the farmers talking about what they wanted, coming up with solutions to issues, and then bringing that forward to the various government agencies and actually having them be implemented. So that's very exciting. The National Organic Standards Board meeting that just went virtual because of the government shutdown. Hopefully we will have it. It's in early November. There were numerous things where the Organic Farmers Association asked for something and got exactly what we asked for. And we were even quoted in the discussion, the legal discussion documents that the National Organic Standards Board put forward as, this is the reason we're doing this, because this commenter convinced us that we should change something. And there it was, our comment. It was so exciting. But of course, not surprising, because we know what needs to be changed. So we have quite a bit of other things: mixed vegetable growers, grain growers, discussion of USDA programs like Farm Service Agency and Natural Resources Conservation Service. And all these things can really help organic farmers have a more resilient operation. So, dairy herd transition to winter. They're going to be inside more. It's colder. It's it's just a little bit harder on them, but they have thick skins, so they can handle it. But especially if you are working with them, you want to think ahead and make it as comfortable for them as possible. So, it looks like somebody else is coming in. Welcome, Martha. We just got started. So we're talking about the organic dairy herd preparing for winter. So it's important for you to think about having enough forage for each age group. So you have calves, you have heifers, You have dry cows, you have cows typically in all stages of lactation, and each of them has a different need for the amount of energy and nutrients. And of course, feeding, if you can, feeding them the different groups, different levels of forages will make you more efficient and save you money. But you need to kind of think about if you had the previous year, you can see how much hay did you use, how much silage did you use. If you're feeding some grain, how much grain did you use? Is it there now? And just be aware that it is much cheaper if you're short to buy it now. You'll get higher quality and you'll pay a better price for you if you buy it going into winter rather than scrounging around looking for something in April. You're better off having a little bit extra than not having enough. Do you have enough equipment and storage to help you handle the forages, especially if you see here kind of a bale feeding machine where it kind of grinds up the bales? If you don't have that, how are you going to feed the animals? Are where is their winter area going to be? Is it set up? Are you going to be calving in the winter? Is there a place set now that's not drafty? Because it is a lot harder to build something when you can't take your gloves off because it's so cold. Get it done in the fall. It'll make things so much easier for you later. And of course, if you're going to have an outside area, do you have, good fencing there? If it's not an area that you've been using already, walk around, make sure everything's in good condition. So there's just some examples of what's coming, nice white landscape. One thing that people have been doing is if you have the time, so you would have done this probably in August, just allow some of your pastures to grow up and then it's what's called stockpiling. So they get a little bit taller than what you would typically allow, but and actually having a little freeze on them actually improves the quality because some of the less desirable plants die off and you have the grasses there, and they can actually go out there and graze. Now, this is probably about the maximum amount of snow that you can have on there, but you can still have them out there grazing. And of course, your organic herd is very accustomed to grazing and likes grazing, and it's good for them to be out, in the sunshine, not all kind of confined together. One thing that's kind of recommended is if you could use some movable fencing, if it's possible. I mean, if the ground's not totally frozen, so you can not overgraze one area. And of course, cattle are known to kind of be picky, pick and choose. You can see that there is hot wire right there. So that they are kind of and then you just keep moving it over. So then they are not overgrazing because you don't want to damage, right? This paddock is not going to recover until next spring. So you definitely don't want to overgraze it when you've in the late winter, in the late fall, when you're, putting the cattle out there for stockpiling. And of course, you can also choose, it looks like these are mostly heifers that are out. So you can just think about what's best for, you might not want to put your highest producing cows out on here because it's not the highest quality forage, but it's just fine for your heifers. As long as they're not, within like last third of gestation for their young, where they need more nutrients. So windbreaks. So if you're going to have cattle outside in kind of a feedlot kind of area, it's really important to have some kind of windbreak to lessen the, those cold winds, right? And of course, you typically would put them to the west. One thing I was doing, I've seen a lot of people do really good windbreaks, and I did not realize this. I learned doing a little research for this, is that it's good to have a little bit of gap. That what happens if it's a solid fence without the gap, that the wind hits that fence, kind of goes up and then falls straight down. And so you're getting this kind of downdraft of very cold air right where the cattle are congregating. But if there's a little bit of gap, even here, a little bit of gap, it allows it stops that kind of windfall over the windbreak. And of course, this is going to allow also some air penetration, not a lot. You're still breaking up, this 25-mile-an-hour wind, right? Wind chill affects cattle too. So we're just trying to give them a nice place out of the wind, and then understand the aerodynamics of it. And this is done a lot with square bales, round bales. I see this all the time on organic dairy farms. And then, of course, by the end of the winter, when you don't need it anymore, they've eaten it all. Although it is nice to cover your forage, because when the weather and the rain is sitting right on it, you do lose about 25%. The cattle will kind of reach into those bales and just throw the other stuff. But if you're intending for some of these bales to become bedding and have a deep bedding pack, then that's part of your system, that they'll be taking some of that forage and making bedding out of it. But then you have to plan, right, that the amount of forage you have is actually 25% less than what's sitting there, because 25% of it is going to turn into bedding. So it's just different kinds of planning. And of course, that deep bedding pack is much more comfortable for them. And then you've got this nice hay and manure for spreading on your fields in the spring. So it's important to just assess what you have on the farm, and then think about who's going to get what. There's dried forages like hay or straw, but not much in the straw. There's grassy hay and alfalfa hay. You're going to have much higher protein in an alfalfa hay. That would be the hay that you would want to feed to your just like the cows in the last third of gestation, and then just starting their lactation. If you've got, different cows in the herd, if you're not doing everything, all of the calves being born in the spring, for instance. So most farmers calve throughout the year, so they don't have all that work dealing with calving in a 2 or 3 month period. There's also mixed grass and alfalfa hay, which is also good, but not as high a nutrient level. There's sorghum Sudan, that would be in silage and haylage. There's mixed pasture and forbs. A lot of times people might come in if it's been a wet season and the pastures have really grown a lot. They come in and do a harvest of the pasture and have that in storage too. And of course, those fermented haylages. So thinking about which forage has its best use and when best to feed the animals and where those animals are in their lactation and gestation cycles are all things to kind of figure out. We're moving into a time of year where it's getting darker, so we have more time to do the paperwork. We're not feeling like we have to be outside working. Do a little bit of planning will help you much later. So you can, for about $20 a sample, get the nutrients assessed in your forages. So you can use like a drill cordless drill, and there are these kind of core drill bits. You can go into a bale and pull out the core, and then use a clean bucket and mix about 15 or 20 samples for each lot. And each lot should be probably from the same field, the same cutting, right? Because if you cut in late May versus cutting in late August, it's going to have different nutrients. So you want to have each lot be the field, the cutting date, and then even separate, did it get rain before you got it rolled up? Because that's going to affect the nutrient as well, and as well as the storage. So if some of it you've had in a lean-to under a roof and some of it's been out in the weather, that would also separate what lot. So you may end up having, 15 different lots. So it might cost you $300, depending on what you have, how big your herd is. And then what you do is you mix all of those in the bucket and then put them in a plastic bag after they've been mixed by lot, and write down which lot it was, and then give it, and so you understand. If you say it's lot 1, then where was lot 1? Was that field 6? Did it not have rain? Was it a grassy hay? I mean, so make sure that you are keeping track, because when you get back, your 20 samples, you're not going to remember. All of a sudden it'll say lot 10 was your best, forage, and you didn't write down which one it was. You thought you would remember, but it's hard. The other thing is, as a certified organic grower, this is another benefit to the great records that you're keeping, right? Because you know which fields have, you can look at your soil tests. It can help you for planning in the future too. If you see a certain field really produce some high quality hay, what's going on in that field so you can duplicate that in other areas. So same thing with silage. You wouldn't take a core out of just one bag, but you might want a core, like depending how big the bags are, down the line, and then cover the hole with tape. Mix them all in the bucket, and then plastic bag. And again, by field, by cutting, that kind of thing. And and even make a note. Was this an alfalfa hay? Was it a grassy alfalfa mix? Was it all alfalfa? Was it sorghum Sudan? What was it? And that again will help you in future years understand which types of forages give you what you need for your herd. So this is where I am not a dairy nutritionist, but there are local extension agents. There are dairy nutritionists around. Talk to other farmers in the area, see who they are working with. But what's important is you will get some testing back that will tell you the fiber, and fiber is extremely important for dairy animals. They have all of those stomachs, those rumens, really important that they have fiber in their diet. And of course, they're coming off of pasture, so they're used to having a lot of fiber. And then there's different kinds of fiber, the dry matter, the neutral detergent fiber. I'm not going to tell you what all these things are. You can look them up. And then there'll be protein, which again, for your late gestation cows and early lactation cows, super important for them to be getting protein and energy. So that'd be calories, right? And then of course you want to know what kind of minerals, so you would know what kind of supplementation you might need for the animals, just like you might be giving supplementation in the summer out in the pasture. And then of course there's something called relative feed quality, which has to do with the digestibility. How old was that forage when it was harvested? Is it kind of leafy? That kind of thing. So you would then allocate your feed based on quality. And think about the way you're storing things. Don't put your highest quality hay in the way back, kind of almost like set it up like in lines so you can pull, you get an extra cold spell, you might, you need to give them a little bit higher quality hay to help them get over that. Even for more of the herd than just the high producing or early lactation cows. Like I said, the lower quality forages for the dry cows or heifers. So, you could pull out of that area. And then if you have people working with you, have them know what each of the areas are. So they're feeding the right hay to the right animals. And then, of course, knowing which supplementation. If you did get a lot of rain when you were harvesting, you might want to do, in addition to the nutrient levels in your forages, just test to see if there's toxins. So you can't, you don't would, so you might end up like mixing to kind of lower that toxin level. You definitely wouldn't want to give something with a high toxin level to your high producing animals or your calves, where they're much more susceptible. And of course, if it's way over the limit, then you want to give it to non-ruminant animals, probably. You have some, swine on the farm, give it to them for bedding. And as I said too, that the storage affects the amount of waste from each bale if it's not under cover. So those are all things to kind of consider. So, the strategies for efficient use, especially if you're going to be buying in any forages, they're not cheap, trucking them in. You really want to be thinking about what's my best use to keep my animals healthy through the winter and not break the bank doing it. So you might have multiple groups. I mean, it's a little bit different in a beef herd where, pretty much you got all your cows and then you've got all your yearlings and everybody's all on the same cycle. But usually in a dairy herd, that's not true. So you might want to, kind of keep them somewhat grouped, feed each group different forage quality determined by what their needs are. This is super important. Wherever, so if you're, using a bunk feeder or you've got a bale feeder or, you're separating them out, make sure that there's enough space for the amount of animals that you have that they can all feed at once. Because the big, bossy, fat cows are going to push the little cows away. And so the ones that you want to gain weight, right, they're not going to be able to get over to that bunk feeder if you only have, and I believe like the optimum is about 30 inches for each animal. So if you are feeding out of like those round bale feeders, you can measure around how many animals are there going to be. If there's going to be more than what can fit around, then you need to have multiple so they can all feed at once. And to retain efficiency, you don't have to leave them all day long with their food because they'll typically all eat and then they'll go and chew their cud and move away or whatever. So just get them out and you'll be more, because otherwise they'll just go there and kind of pick and pull and make bedding out of it. They're not really eating it, right? They're just kind of like messing around, like we play with our food, they play with their food. So you can kind of move them out and just put them in there like twice a day. And you'll be more efficient. They won't waste as much. And then also too, is just be paying attention for every 1 degree below 32 degrees, you need to think about giving them 1% more energy so they can stay warm. So more calories. So that's just kind of a, basic. And I think that is the end. But first, I just want to also talk about that there is a National Organic Farmer Education Network for more things, but we're going to have a little discussion now and talk. But I just want to bring that up. And there we go.